Imagine a town where legends come to life, where every November, the whispers of ancient spirits echo through the mist. Tonight, you'll uncover a story that's haunted generations, a tale of forbidden love, relentless sorrow, and a curse that lingers beneath the shadow of an ancient tree. Follow Alex, a skeptic who dared to confront the weeping willow's ghostly legend, thinking it was nothing more than a tale to scare children. But as the storm rolls in and lightning illuminates a sorrowful figure waiting in the rain, Alex is drawn into a world beyond his understanding. Prepare to step into a haunting mystery where every shadow hides a story and every raindrop carries a memory. Will Alex break free, or will he become just another part of the legend? Stay with us till the end as we reveal what lies beneath the weeping willow. The mystery beneath the weeping willow. The town where Alex lived was a peaceful place with a slow pace of life and little change over the decades. Yet it harbored a frightening legend about the weeping willow at the edge of the forest. Every November, townsfolk would whisper of the ghostly figure of a girl who appeared beneath the ancient tree, her face etched with sorrow, as if waiting for someone in the stormy night. According to legend, the girl and her lover were tragically separated by harsh societal prejudices. After her lover died in a tragic accident, the girl, overcome by despair, took her own life beneath the willow tree. Since then, her spirit has been trapped in this world, never able to move on. The townspeople believe that anyone daring enough to enter the forest on a stormy night and approach the willow tree would fall under her curse, a curse that would haunt them forever with her undying sorrow. Alex, a young man full of skepticism and disbelief in ghostly tales, decided he would prove it was all just rumors. When November arrived and the storms began, he accepted his friend's challenge and prepared for a daring journey. That night, the sky was dark, as if in a silent rage, thunder crashing across the land as rain poured down ceaselessly. Alex donned a thick coat, grabbed his flashlight, and brought a small notebook to record everything he would experience. As he stepped outside, he felt a twinge of unease in his heart, but he brushed it off and continued toward the forest. The path leading to the willow was covered in fallen leaves, and strong winds made the branches creak in the darkness. Each of Alex's steps seemed to sink him deeper into the shadowy night, and he became more aware of the earthy scent mixed with the dampness of rain-soaked grass. The closer he got to the willow, the more his unease grew, yet he reassured himself that he would not be frightened by a mere legend. When he arrived, Alex saw the willow standing as a giant shadow in the rain, its branches drooping like thousands of thin, skeletal arms swaying in the wind. Just as he was gazing at the tree, a bolt of lightning lit up the sky, and in the brief flash, Alex saw a faint figure silently standing under the tree's canopy. It was a woman dressed in white, her long, wet hair obscuring her face. Alex's heart raced, but his curiosity compelled him to step closer. When he was just a few feet away, he called out, "Who are you?" The woman turned her head, and in the dim light he could clearly see her eyes filled with endless sorrow. Her gaze pierced deep into his, cold yet seeming to carry an unspoken message. Her voice echoed, soft yet laced with resentment. "You shouldn't be here." Her words echoed through the rainy night, sending a chill down Alex's spine. He felt as if his feet were cemented to the ground, unable to move. The woman drew closer, and he could see her face shifting from sorrow to hatred, as if he was the one who had caused her suffering. The woman began to recount her tragic story about a forbidden love and her lover's untimely death, and the despair that had driven her to take her own life. As she spoke, Alex felt as though he was being drawn into her memories, images of her past unfolding before him, happy afternoons with her lover, whispered promises, and gentle embraces beneath the willow tree. However, the happy scene quickly turned to tragedy as Alex saw the girl standing alone beside her lover's overturned car. Her scream echoed in his mind, and he felt as if he too was experiencing her unbearable pain. She continued speaking, her voice growing more threatening. "Those who dare to intrude on my pain must be punished." Realizing the danger he was in, Alex struggled to break free from her curse. He ran from the shadow of the tree, but the surroundings seemed to turn into a labyrinth, with every possible escape route concealed. The woman appeared everywhere he turned, her sorrowful eyes fixed on him. Branches seemed to come alive, their limbs hanging down to block his path, and the wind howled past his ears, carrying her whispers, drowning him in an overwhelming fear. In a moment of despair, Alex closed his eyes and muttered a prayer, hoping for some miracle to help him escape this curse. Everything around him seemed to pause, and when he opened his eyes, he found himself at the edge of the forest, standing in the pouring rain with the distant lights of the town beckoning him back. After that night, Alex returned home thinking it was all over, but he was mistaken. Every November night, the girl's mournful cries haunted his sleep like a melody that would never end. When he looked into the mirror, he felt her presence, her cold gaze boring into his mind. His friends who had dared him to go to the Willow noticed the change in him, but Alex didn't dare share his terrifying experience, fearing that doing so would forever bind him to the curse. Tormented by the unrelenting haunt, Alex decided to return to the willow tree to find a way to lift the curse. He believed that only by confronting the girl's pain and understanding what she needed could he free himself from this torment. On his way, he sought out an elderly man in the town who had lived there long enough to know all the ancient stories. The old man told him about the woman in the legend and how she had once longed for a locket from her lover so she could hold a part of him close forever. Realizing this could be the key, Alex returned to the forest, searching for any trace of the locket. After a long search, he found an old silver locket buried beneath layers of leaves at the base of the willow tree, dusty and tarnished with time. Holding it, he whispered a silent prayer for the girl's soul to find peace. As Alex held the necklace, a sudden chill swept through the forest, causing the trees to rustle and raindrops to fall heavily to the ground. His hands felt as cold as ice, and the necklace seemed to grow heavier, as if it bore the weight of the girl's sorrow. Suddenly, a faint light appeared around the base of the willow tree. Turning around, Alex saw the girl more clearly than ever before. No longer a mere shadow, she appeared with a pale yet serene face, her sorrowful eyes free from hatred. She looked directly at Alex, a faint, fragile smile on her lips. "You found it," she whispered, her voice soft yet clear, as though it came from a faraway place. "This was the last gift he promised me. He carried it with him that night, planning to give it to me. But the accident took him away." Alex held his breath, listening to her every word, feeling her pain seep into his soul. The girl reached out and he felt an icy sensation as he placed the necklace in her hand. As she touched it, the faint glow around the willow tree grew brighter, and in that moment, Alex saw a young man beside her, his face both joyful and sorrowful. The girl turned to the young man, her eyes filled with love and longing. Alex realized this was her lost love. The two of them gazed at each other with pure love and bittersweet regret. A moment seemingly frozen in time, a place where suffering no longer existed, only the purest love. She looked back at Alex one last time, gratitude shining in her eyes, and softly said, "Thank you. Because of you, we can finally reunite. My pain has come to an end, and I am no longer bound to this place." With these final words, both she and her lover slowly faded into the radiant light, merging with the peaceful darkness of the night. Alex felt an immense weight lift from his heart, standing there as he watched them disappear, his heart both lightened and strangely moved. After that night, Alex returned home, and for the first time in months he slept peacefully, no longer haunted by whispers or terrifying images. It felt as though he had awoken from a strange dream, but the memory of the necklace remained, reminding him that it had all been real. In the days that followed, Alex slowly returned to his normal life, yet he saw the world through new eyes. He became more appreciative of the relationships around him, understanding that some pain and love could never fade with time. He often visited the weeping Willow, which now stood silently in the forest as nothing more than an ancient tree, no longer associated with tales of ghostly sorrow. As time passed, Alex shared his story with his closest friends, not to scare them, but as a reminder to cherish and empathize with others. His friends, initially skeptical, gradually grew thoughtful, and the legend of the Willow began to change in the minds of the townsfolk. It was no longer a tale meant to frighten children, but a story of love that never dies, a lesson in courage, empathy, and scars that remain. Every November, Alex still visited the Willow. He often left a bouquet of white flowers at its roots, a tribute to the departed lovers. On stormy nights, he sat under the tree's branches, listening to the rain, the whispering wind, and feeling the peace that the Willow now brought. The abandoned cabin. In the last days of November, a group of friends, Anna, Jake, Sarah, and Tom, planned a camping trip deep in a remote forest. They were looking forward to escaping the noise and bustle of their lives, drawn by the promise of an isolated spot, beautiful trees, and a weekend away from all their worries. The air was cold, with the scent of autumn mingling with the first hints of winter. Their backpacks were full, and they were eager for an adventure. As they hiked further into the forest, clouds began to gather ominously, blocking out the fading daylight. Thunder rumbled in the distance, and within minutes a downpour began, soaking them through. The wind picked up, whipping through the trees, and it became clear they needed to find shelter quickly. Through the thickening mist, Tom spotted a wooden structure in the distance. As they approached, they realized it was an old cabin, worn down by time and covered in moss. The cabin had an unsettling, forgotten air, but with the storm raging, it was their only option. They shared uneasy glances, but agreed there was no other choice. Shivering and soaked, they hurried inside, feeling a chill in the air that seemed colder than the storm outside. The cabin's interior was dim and filled with the musty smell of rot and mildew. The walls were lined with cobwebs, and the air felt thick with dust. The wooden floor creaked under their weight, echoing eerily in the stillness. On a dusty shelf by the door, Jake found an old candle and a box of matches. He struck a match, lighting the candle, which cast flickering shadows across the room. In the dim light, they saw an old chair tipped over, a broken table, and a few shelves stocked with forgotten odds and ends. Each friend felt an unexplainable sense of dread. They laughed it off at first, attributing it to the eerie setting and the storm, but the feeling wouldn't shake. Sarah shivered, pulling her jacket tighter around her. "It's just an old cabin," she muttered, trying to sound brave. But even she could hear the unease in her voice. As the candlelight wavered, the shadows around the room seemed to stretch and shift, casting odd shapes on the walls. Anna noticed it first, a faint scratching sound that seemed to come from the walls. "Do you guys hear that?" she whispered, looking around. The others nodded, their faces tense. The scratching continued, soft but unmistakable. It seemed to move along the walls, from one corner of the cabin to another, as if something, or someone, was lurking just behind the wooden panels. Jake moved closer to one of the walls, pressing his ear against it. "Maybe it's an animal," he said, trying to reassure himself as much as the others. But then they heard something else, a faint, breathy whisper. The words were muffled, almost unintelligible, but it was clear enough to make the hair on the back of their necks stand up. The whispers grew louder, repeating over and over, "Get out! Now! Get out!" Their hearts pounded in sync with the growing intensity of the whispers. Sarah clutched her arms tightly, her eyes wide with fear. The whispers grew louder and more insistent, the words becoming sharper, echoing off the walls and surrounding them. It was no longer just one voice. It seemed to be multiple voices, all chanting the same command. "Get out! Get out! Get out!" With each repetition, the whispering became more urgent, almost angry. The candle flickered violently, casting erratic shadows on the walls that seemed to move on their own. The friends could barely breathe, each feeling an overwhelming sense of dread, as if something was closing in around them. Jake tried to keep his composure, though his voice trembled as he said, "Maybe we should just stay calm. Maybe it's just the wind." But as he spoke, one of the shadows on the wall began to change. It stretched and elongated, forming a dark figure that seemed to be staring at them from the far side of the room. Anna let out a stifled gasp, pointing at the shadow. The figure's head turned slowly, its eyes locked onto them, following their every movement. It seemed more than just a shadow, almost as if something was inside the cabin, observing them through the darkness. Frozen with fear, they watched as the shadow drifted along the wall, gliding toward the door. It paused, almost as if it were daring them to try and leave. As the shadow hovered by the door, the scratching on the walls intensified, now coming from all directions. The whispers continued, louder and louder, each voice blending into the next in a chilling symphony that seemed to shake the very foundation of the cabin. "Get out! Get out! Now!" The voices no longer sounded like warnings. They felt like threats. Tom grabbed Sarah's hand, his voice panicked. "We need to leave, now!" They scrambled to their feet, grabbing their bags and moving toward the door. But as they reached the door, the shadow shifted, growing darker and taller, blocking their way. Anna screamed, her voice echoing against the walls, but the shadow didn't budge. It stood there, almost taunting them, as the scratching and whispers surrounded them like a cage of sound. Desperate, Jake lunged forward, pushing the door open and breaking through the shadowy figure. They stumbled out into the pouring rain, their hearts racing as they sprinted into the forest, leaving the cabin behind. None of them dared to look back until they were well away from the clearing. Breathless and soaked, they reached a small hill that offered a view of the cabin from a distance. They paused, gathering their thoughts and catching their breath. Curiosity mingled with fear, and one by one they turned to look back. In the faint gray light of dawn, the cabin stood eerily still. For a moment it seemed like nothing was out of the ordinary, but then, through the dirty windows, they saw movement. Shadows danced across the glass as if figures were pacing back and forth, watching them. One shadow seemed to pause, its form distinct, almost like a person standing just behind the window. The shadow lifted what looked like a hand, pressing it against the glass, as if it were trying to reach out to them. The friends shivered, each of them struck by a chilling realization. Whatever was in that cabin, it was aware of their presence, and it had watched them leave. The hand slowly slid down the glass, leaving a faint, ghostly trail. The shadow faded, but the sense of being watched remained. Back in town, the friends tried to shake off the memory of that night, but each time they closed their eyes, the cabin seemed to reappear in their minds, along with the whispers and the scratching. Night after night, the sense of dread lingered, a reminder of what they had encountered. Jake started having dreams where he was back in the cabin, surrounded by shadows that whispered in his ear. Anna swore she could still hear faint scratching on her bedroom walls late at night. Tom found himself staring at dark corners, expecting shadows to move, while Sarah often woke up in a cold sweat, feeling as if someone was watching her. One evening, Jake confided to the group, "I keep seeing the shadow. Every time I look in a dark room, it's there, waiting for me." The others nodded in uneasy agreement. They knew they were each haunted in their own way, unable to fully escape the grip of the cabin. One winter evening, Sarah suggested they go back, feeling a strange urge to return to the cabin and face whatever was haunting them. "Maybe if we go back, we can end this. Whatever it is," she said, her voice barely a whisper. Reluctantly, the friends agreed. They knew they couldn't keep living with the fear that had settled into their lives, so they returned to the forest, retracing their steps until they reached the familiar clearing. The cabin was there just as they had left it, silent and dark. They stepped inside, feeling the air grow colder, as if the cabin recognized them. The scratching began again, and the whispers returned, louder and more hostile. But this time they stayed, determined to confront the shadows that had haunted them. As they lit a candle, the shadows gathered, swirling around them like a storm of darkness. The voices grew deafening, their words indistinct but filled with anger. The friends stood their ground, chanting their own defiance into the dark. Then, in one final crescendo, the shadows receded, fading into the walls. The whispers died down, and the cabin fell silent. It was as if a presence had finally departed, leaving the cabin empty once more. Back in town, the haunting ceased. The dreams, the whispers, and the scratching sounds vanished, and the friends could finally move on. Yet, deep down, they each knew that a part of the cabin stayed with them. Sometimes, on quiet nights, when the wind whispered through the trees, one of them would remember that shadow by the window, the hand pressed against the glass, watching them leave. The November rain ceremony. In a small ancient town nestled in a secluded valley, shrouded in mist and mystery, each November brought with it an event spoken of only in whispers. The November rain ceremony. The legend told that hundreds of years ago, the town was cursed after its people, desperate for rain during a terrible drought, performed a forbidden ritual in the old cemetery. Rain finally came, saving the town from starvation. But the price was steep. The spirits of the cemetery had granted rain in exchange for an annual ritual to honor them. Each year, on the stormiest night in November, the townspeople gathered to fulfill their pact, ensuring the spirits would remain appeased. For generations, the ceremony had taken place in secret. Outsiders were warned to stay away, and the townspeople never shared details. Only those born here can witness the ceremony safely, they would say, though they never explained why. It was known that any intruder who dared approach the cemetery on the night of the ceremony would risk their life, but there were always those who couldn't resist a mystery. One November, a group of university friends arrived in the town, intrigued by its eerie legends. They had heard rumors of the November rain ceremony and decided to uncover the truth. Emily, the most curious of the group, was fascinated by folklore and believed there was an explanation behind every myth. Her friends, Mark, Sophia, and David, were eager to join her on what they thought would be an adventure. They had no idea what awaited them. The day of the ceremony arrived with the unmistakable chill of an approaching storm. The friends spent the day gathering stories from the locals, who only responded with grave looks and strict warnings to stay away from the cemetery after sunset. The ritual is not for outsiders. It's dangerous, a shopkeeper told them. The spirits of this town are not like others. They are powerful, and they do not forgive intrusions. But Emily was undeterred. She convinced her friends that these were just tales to keep the curious away, meant to add a layer of mystique to the ritual. Mark was the only one who hesitated, but under Emily's insistence, he agreed to go along. As the storm clouds gathered, they prepared themselves, pulling on rain jackets and packing flashlights. By nightfall, the storm had grown fierce, with rain pouring in torrents and lightning streaking the sky. Guided only by their flashlights, they made their way through the drenched forest toward the cemetery. They kept low, moving in silence, aware that the townsfolk might not welcome their presence. The cemetery lay on the outskirts of town, surrounded by ancient trees and hidden by shadows. The air felt thick with something unspoken, a heaviness that seemed to cling to their skin. When they finally reached the cemetery, the friends hid behind a cluster of tall, overgrown bushes, watching as the townsfolk gathered in cloaks, faces obscured, forming a circle around a decrepit mausoleum. One by one, the townspeople lit candles, each flame wavering in the rain, yet strangely resistant to the downpour. The flames cast an eerie glow across the cemetery, illuminating the worn tombstones and the crumbling structure of the mausoleum. Then, in unison, the townsfolk began to chant in a low, rhythmic tone. The language was ancient and haunting, a sound that sent chills down the friends' spines. Hidden among the bushes, Emily and her friends exchanged nervous glances. The chanting grew louder, blending with the storm, as if the voices of the townspeople and the roar of the wind were intertwined. The air around them felt charged with an otherworldly energy. They could barely breathe, transfixed by the sight before them. As the chanting continued, the ground beneath their feet began to tremble. At first, it was a subtle vibration, but it soon grew stronger, as if something deep within the earth was awakening. The friends tried to reassure themselves, thinking it was only an effect of the storm, but then a strange mist began to rise from the ground. The mist was thick, almost alive, swirling around the tombstones, wrapping itself around the legs of the cloaked townspeople. It twisted and writhed, gradually moving toward the hidden group of friends. David felt a sudden, inexplicable chill as the mist crept closer. He looked over at Emily, who was watching in awe, unaware of the growing danger. The chant grew louder, and the mist began to take shape, forming ghostly outlines that seemed to float above the ground. One figure, a translucent woman with hollow eyes, drifted toward them, her expression blank but her presence overwhelming. The group froze, feeling the weight of her gaze as though it pierced their souls. I think we should leave," Mark whispered, barely able to control his shaking voice. But Emily shook her head, unable to look away, her curiosity overpowering her fear. "Not yet," she murmured. "We're so close." Just then, the spirits turned their attention toward the friends, as if sensing their intrusion. The figures in the mist grew darker, their hollow faces twisted in expressions of anger and sorrow. The townspeople continued chanting, their voices reaching a feverish pitch, as if unaware of the outsiders. One by one, the spirits drifted closer, surrounding the friends. Their whispers filled the air, soft and eerie, yet growing louder with every word. "You do not belong here. Leave, leave." The friends backed up instinctively, their fear finally overpowering their curiosity. The shadows closed in, reaching out ghostly hands that sent a freezing chill through the air. Emily stumbled, realizing that her legs felt heavy, almost rooted to the ground. She tried to pull herself up, but the mist seemed to cling to her, as though it was absorbing her strength. Sophia's face was pale with terror as she clutched Mark's arm. "We have to get out of here, now," she said, her voice barely audible over the whispers and chanting. But as they tried to move, the mist grew denser, pulling them back. Each of them felt an overwhelming pressure, as though the air itself was turning solid. Mark tried to push forward, but his limbs felt heavy, as though they were dissolving into the mist. The others reached out for him, but it was as if he was fading from their sight, his form growing faint and translucent. Emily reached out, desperately calling his name, but her voice was swallowed by the whispers. The spirit with hollow eyes drifted closer, her expression now one of sorrow, almost as if she pitied them. Then, one by one, the friends began to disappear, each fading into the mist, their terrified faces the last thing visible before they vanished entirely. Emily's vision blurred, her surroundings melting into darkness. She felt her mind slipping, like she was falling into an endless abyss, her thoughts drowned by the whispers. The spirits closed in around her, their hands cold and relentless, dragging her into the unknown. She struggled, but her strength faded, and soon there was nothing left of her but a faint shadow lost in the mist. When the mist finally cleared, the townspeople lowered their hoods, extinguishing their candles one by one. The chanting stopped and an eerie silence filled the air. The ground was still, the storm had subsided, and all that remained were the tombstones and the empty mausoleum. There was no trace of the intruders. They had been absorbed into the shadows, taken by the spirits that guarded the town's secrets. Without a word, the townspeople turned and began to walk back to the town, their faces blank, but their eyes filled with a silent resignation. They knew the ritual had been completed, the curse had been upheld, and the spirits were once again satisfied, for now. Each figure melted into the night, disappearing one by one, until the cemetery was left empty, save for the faint traces of mist that clung to the ground like a lingering memory. The following morning, the town was quiet. No one spoke of the previous night as though the ceremony had never taken place. But every resident knew that the November rain ceremony was more than just a tradition. It was a necessity, a reminder of the pact made with the spirits long ago. The legend would continue, waiting for the next November storm, when the town would gather once more. And the spirits, restless and ever watchful, would be there, lingering in the mist, waiting for the unwelcome, those foolish enough to intrude. And if any stranger dared to stay and witness the ritual, they too would hear the warning, a whisper in the air, faint but undeniable. Leave, or join those who never will. In the shadows of the ancient cemetery, the spirits watched and waited, knowing they would be called upon again. The town's secret was safe, sealed by the November rains and the silent devotion of its people as they protected the boundary between the living and the dead. Thank you for watching today's story. I hope these chilling experiences have made you reflect on fears and trust in life. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like button and share your thoughts in the comments below. Be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel so you don't miss out on more engaging stories and interesting content in the future. Thank you for your support, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.